Hello and welcome. It's lovely to be with you this morning or evening, whatever time it may be where you are.
Hi, everyone. Happy to be here. Thanks for joining us.
So why don't we begin by raising Bodhicitta or connecting with the awakened heart. So we can, if you feel comfortable, you can bring your hands together, your palms together. And this is an opportunity to connect with our intention, our motivation in coming together for these practices today. Our motivation might begin at the personal level, your personal motivation. And from there we expand to include other beings. Today we'd like to in particular bring into our practice those who are suffering from illness, particularly those who perhaps are alone because of this illness, alone in hospitals, without loved ones. We also want to bring into our practice all those working in the healthcare field, on the front lines, putting themselves at risk. And from there, we extend our intention that our practice may benefit all beings. Thank you. So we've come together for compassion practice, also what we might call a practice of the awakened heart. And I think this time is a particularly powerful time to connect with the awakened heart, or what in the Buddhist tradition is called Bodhicitta, Sanskrit word, Bodhi, awake, Chitta, heart, or heart-mind. And in some ways, when I look at my own experience and the experience of those around me, it's almost like the buffers have been taken away that we normally have in our everyday life, sort of motoring through our lives, and we hear news or we hear how other people are doing, but there's a sort of buffer of maybe normalcy or expectation or how we've learned to cope in the world. And somehow it feels like those buffers have been pulled away, stripped away. It's almost like there's a rawness to our experience, like that outer layer of skin or protection, or maybe the callus has been removed. And so we're feeling more. I think we're all feeling more. And those emotions range widely, right? There can be, maybe we feel more, and that's just suddenly there's a sadness that arises in us. Or maybe there's uncertainty or fear or real sense of hurt. And also, though, I want to say part of the awakened heart is we feel more the beauty of life. Those of us in the Northern Hemisphere, spring is coming. The joy of seeing a flower bloom. The joy of being with a loved one. The good meals we may have if we have the privilege to eat well in these days. So it's almost that feeling more, being moved more. It's like the world is moving us. We are feeling that way in which we are impacted, moved. And what is that? What's at the heart of being moved? At the heart of being moved is that awakened quality. It's our true nature, which is vibrantly wakeful, luminously awake, present, can feel everything, can sense everything. That's what the awakened heart is. Vibrantly, radiantly wakeful. able, willing to feel everything, be moved by everything, and simultaneously in that recognize that incredible sense of connectedness. Why can we move? Why can we be moved by things we experience? Why are we moved when we hear of stories, when we see someone suffering, or maybe someone in joy? It's because we're profoundly connected to them. We're actually not other than anyone. And so we come into our true nature, that true nature of profound interconnectedness, profound wakefulness. It's actually stepping in, having an experience of who we truly are. It's said that Bodhicitta, the awakened heart, is an expression of our true being, of the ground of being. That compassion is not something we have to put on like a cloak, like a recipe, but that actually when we rest into our true nature, compassion arises naturally, overflows. It's like a wellspring. There's a lot of science, current neuroscience going on around compassion, and also compassion trainings that are being developed that I've been involved with at Naropa, for example, but other universities as well. And there's a way that compassion is articulated, which I think taps right into these traditional teachings on compassion as well. And the first piece of compassion, the way it's articulated, is that it involves wakefulness, seeing what's going on, awareness. So my ability to see if there's suffering, compassion relates specifically to our ability to see the suffering or the pain of another. And you remember the story of the Buddha, and his first teaching is the truth of suffering. What a way to start a tradition. Probably not such good marketing, but maybe the best marketing because it's true. We begin by looking, by becoming aware. Compassion begins with the courage to be wakeful, to recognize suffering. That includes in ourselves as well as others. And then the second part is about our feeling into that suffering, our willingness to have empathy, to actually be moved by it, not just to hear it, not just to maybe see it, but then feel into it, lean into it. Empathy, right? So the first part is that wakefulness of awakened heart. And the second part is the heartfulness, that stepping in, being willing to truly feel. And the third part of compassion, as it's articulated in a lot of current research and trainings, is the aspect of action, right? That compassion is also about our relief of suffering, our wish to relieve suffering, right? In relative bodhicitta, wish and action, the wish to relieve the suffering, and then doing what we can to relieve that suffering. So these are the three components. And in our practice, and here I like to draw on Lama Tsultrim's invitation to see our practice as a kind of activism, as contemplative activism. When she talks about Green Tara, she talks about her as a contemplative activist, that one foot engaged in the world, moving into the world. And so our compassion practice is about all these layers, becoming wakeful, aware of suffering, of what's going on, opening those 1,000 eyes of Avalokiteshvara, the Bodhisattva of compassion, leaning in, feeling, letting the heart break open. Letting the heart break open, but not to get stuck there, but actually to wake up into our profound interconnectedness and the empowerment of compassion. And from that place, offer healing, offer loving kindness, offer whatever relieving action we can.
So, I'd like to invite you to join us. Let's do a little meditation. And then we'll continue to talk a little more about compassion and ways that we can tap into that today and in these days. And then we'll do some other compassion practices as well. But let's, for a moment, just become present in our places where we are right now. You might want to adopt a posture that supports wakefulness or meditation. Comfortable posture, yet something that supports your alertness. Maybe sit up straighter, no matter what you're sitting on or how you're sitting. And then simply come home, if you're comfortable with that, in your body. Just feel your physical being, your body. You're bringing your presence, you're bringing your attention into the present moment. If there are external distractions or thoughts, just let go of those for the moment. Here you are, here we all are. Nothing else to do right now. Just resting in this moment. Feeling our body, maybe becoming aware of the space around us, whether it's a room, or maybe you're even outside, but just the immediate space. And there's nothing to do really in this present moment, but just maybe a slight sense of surrender to the moment. A kind of a letting go of everything you're holding or feel like you should be holding. Letting go into the moment. Sense of simple presence. And yet there's this sense of the subtle wakefulness that Charlotte was talking about. Our awareness itself. What is it that is present? Something there is awake, and we rest in that. And then for a moment, if you wish, we expend our awareness to everyone on this, in this moment that is watching and that is joining us on this video. People all over the world. We are all present here, focused on the same moment. Just feel an easeful connection, an interconnectedness. And yet again, we can relax into that, just being together, just for a moment. And then we find our awareness back in the smaller space of self, of own body, own space. If your eyes were closed, you're welcome to open them again or keep them closed. And maybe we'll transition to just saying a few more words about compassion. And Charlotte was saying that compassion or bodhicitta arises naturally out of the ground of being. Absolute compassion is actually inherent in the nature of our mind. It doesn't have to be generated or manufactured. It is already present in our essence. And so in a way, if we can make space for it, it will naturally arise. It's our natural way of being. So how do we tap into that? Why are we not constantly abiding in the space of deep and absolute compassion? In order to tap into that, there's a certain amount of letting go, or call it maybe acceptance, that it has to happen. Something maybe akin a little bit to what we just practiced. And we tend to have these ego patterns or these postures of avoidance, of negativity, postures of reactivity. We have this self. Our ego is employed in the activity of protecting and maintaining the self, and it makes us sometimes very tightly wound and very reactive. We are on guard for anything that can compromise us in that sense. Anything that has a flavor of being negative, like a negative emotion, we react, we turn away, we guard against. And those postures of reactivity and those postures of avoidance kind of locks us into a tighter space where we don't have access in the immediate sense of, we don't have access to this interconnectedness, this transpersonal field of awareness. In the immediate sense, we always have access to that because it is our nature. We cannot never actually be disconnected from it. But we can very often, speaking for myself, have the impression of being disconnected from this vaster ground of being, from which compassion arises naturally. And so we fixed in these postures of affliction and avoidance of affliction. So in order to tap in, there's a little bit of a turn. There's a little bit of a willingness to not be so defensive, to actually turn into those emotions that we've made such a habit of avoiding, difficult emotions. And so in this time, there's a lot of fear. There's a lot of anxiety. There's a lot of uncertainty, fear and anxiety based on uncertainty. There's true suffering. There are people breathing their last breaths or dying alone, isolated in ICUs. There are people on the front lines that are nurses and doctors that are putting themselves out there. But for most of us, we're being asked to fight this battle from our couches. There is no front line for us. We're sitting on our couch, having to deal with all these emotions and the anxiety and the fear, our own financial situations, our jobs, security around that. How long is this going to go on? No one knows. So there's tremendous potential for fear and uncertainty and falling into anxiety. So am I saying we should just, turn into this courageously and, go for the trauma of being, potentially overwhelmed? No, that's not what I'm saying. However, reflexively avoiding that is also not bringing us to a good place, because we're in the posture of avoidance, which is a suffering in itself. We fall into guilt about sitting on our couches and not really being able to help. So what are we saying? We're saying that gently turning into these emotions, opening to them, and experiencing them directly, not the stories around the emotions, not the story making. Our minds, our egos, reflexively, immediately, automatically make up stories about our emotions, underlying emotions. So instead of making stories, can we just turn to whatever seems like fear that we're holding out on the edge, and just simply feel that in our bodies? Can we have a little bit of acceptance? We have to accept things in the moment as they are. I'm not talking about some kind of passive giving up, let things overwhelm you and there's nothing you can do kind of acceptance. I'm talking about an acceptance in the moment and tapping into a basic okayness. Another way to do that, and we'll play with that a little bit in a moment, but another way to do that, another doorway. So just to jump back a little bit, what I'm saying is that our own emotions, difficult emotions, can be doorways into connectivity, into compassion. But another doorway in is also gratitude. Charlotte and I have been doing these daily meditations, and some of you on this video, some of you might have been joining us. So we spoke a little bit about gratitude specifically, and in this way where you tap into the gratitude, not guilt, but gratitude. For what you have. People were saying in that meditation, we asked, like, what is it that comes up for you that you're grateful? And several people said breathing or lungs or the ability to breathe freely, for example. But, to have a place where we're sitting, to have an internet connection and so forth. We looked at just basic, simple things that we can be grateful for in the moment. And when you drop into that gratitude, and that gratitude becomes a resource in itself that can power compassion. By virtue of relaxing into gratitude, from that place, you can be generous with your compassion. You find a wellspring of generosity and compassion because you have so much to be grateful for. And then you can share compassion out from that place. So then you're doing something. You're not just sitting and having this happen to you and having this uncertainty and anxiety and getting into a victim mode. You're actually turning that by opening to what is real, what is actually going on in the moment, by becoming present in the moment and turning into what seems like difficult emotions that are coming down the pike. And just feeling them in your body and opening and finding that basic space of sanity. Or, as I said, gratitude, tuning to your gratitude, imagining the things or thinking of the things, reminding yourself of the things that you're grateful for. And then from that place of agency, of gratitude, then we can do compassion practice or share compassion out.
So let's try this right now in the moment as a practice. And I'm going to invite you again to come into a felt sense of your body and your seat wherever you're sitting, or maybe you're lying down or standing. If you'd like, you can close your eyes for this. Sometimes that can help. Or leave them open, whatever feels most comfortable. Notice your breath, just rising and falling naturally. And I invite you now to bring into your awareness a particular emotion, perhaps difficult emotion, that's been alive for you of late. Maybe you're feeling it right now, or recently in these past days. It might be sadness or fear, uncertainty, loneliness. Just genuinely a feeling that you've been aware of. And let yourself tap into that feeling right now as best you can. Let it become alive for you. There might be a particular experience you had, something you saw or heard that really sparked this or evoked this emotion for you. You want to recall that, to really let yourself feel into the emotion. You could do that. But then let that image go, let the story go, and let yourself just feel that particular feeling. Feel it in your body. Notice where your body constricts or feels energy moving, or maybe feels numb. If there's any kind of story you have about this, about not that you shouldn't feel this, or it's not good to feel this, let that go. Let any kind of story or narrative you have about this feeling, let those go. Like balloons, let them go up into the sky. Just release and return to the felt sense. Let yourself sink a little bit deeper into the felt sense. Relax into it. It's almost as if you're diving into a deep lake. Let this feeling hold you. Just enter this feeling. Let yourself float in this lake. Relax into it. If there's any resistance, then just gently breathe into that. Let that resistance rest into this feeling as well. You're opening more and more just to the felt experience. Again, whatever stories or narratives might arise, let them drift off into the open sky. You're floating in this lake, deep, open. Maybe there are some other rivulets of other emotional qualities that are rising. Just notice them in the current of the lake. If anything, let yourself rest a little bit more. Relax back a little bit more. And then slowly bring your awareness back into your body as it's sitting on the cushion or chair, ground. Notice the state and quality of your heart, mind. Take a nice in breath, feeling the aliveness of your body. And exhaling into the big, wide open. If you've had your eyes closed, I invite you to open them. So we'd love to hear a little bit from you. If in your, I don't know what it's called in Facebook. In Zoom it's called chat, but there's a place where you can write in some comments. So if you'd write in some comments of anything you experienced in this contemplation.
Or what came up for you.
That would be great. Love to hear from you. Calming. Love the image of the balloons. Deep underlying sadness. Powerful resistance. being supported by the water element allowed me, oh, it's going so fast I can't read it. Allowed me to feel the emotions and let go of the stories. I was diagnosed with breast cancer. This meditation was the first time I have leaned into the fear. The lake became my mammogram, and I could imagine reaching out and touching where the tumor is and not being afraid. Thank you.
Beautiful. Thanks for your courage.
And blessings for your healing.
Yes. It does take courage to do this. But when we do that, we see that we can survive our emotions. They feel like they will, these demons will completely annihilate us. But if we do it in a careful way, really in this way, we can survive those. Restless reaction.
Amazing that without the story there is not much left of the emotion itself.
Anxiety turned to calmness.
Being able to connect with deep sadness and grief and just be there and observe it.
The need to connect with other people. I've been avoiding returning calls and messages due to the avoidance posture you spoke of. Incredibly calm and surrendered. Staying with the unpleasant feeling. Yes, difficult. Dropped into feeling deeply and not turning away. Thank you. We are so programmed, so deeply conditioned to turn away. And, for relative self-preservation reasons, it's not a problem. Sometimes for expediency's sake, we do have to turn and distract ourselves in order to get them and to make dinner and so forth. But at times when we have the wherewithal and the moment in our day where we can turn into this, and we can make this a practice, we condition ourselves to turn towards it more and more rather than reflexively avoid. So thank you for sharing. It's so beautiful what you're all saying. It's really great to. It's sort of like it's when we sit here and speak, it's a one-way thing. But then reading your comments, it's wonderful. Thank you for sharing.
Yes, and I see a lot of mention of sadness, and it makes me think. Chogyam Trungpa describes Bodhicitta as the genuine heart of sadness, and it's both sadness as well as joy. It's our ability to feel. But that genuineness, I think right now, sadness is very real for so many of us. So being able to sink into that sadness as actually the place of our connection. We talk about the heart breaking open. And that's where we connect. What is that great Leonard Cohen song? It's where the light shines in. It's where you see, I'm bad with these things. When the heart breaks, it's where the light shines in. So that place where we break, where we feel into our sadness, into our fear, we all have our own words, right? Our cracks look different. That's where the light shines. And that's the light of bodhicitta. That's the light of compassion. That's the light of our luminous wakefulness. So what we like to do now is the Tonglen practice, which I'm guessing some of you are familiar with, but which is such a powerful practice to me, to us, I know to so many of us, particularly in difficult times. And it's very much about letting the heart break open, because it does exactly the opposite of what we normally do. He's talking about the stance of avoidance. And so Tonglen says, go to those places, look towards that which will break your heart open. Go towards that which you would avoid. And not only go towards it, but take it in. So normally, if we see suffering, we want to create a barrier. right? We want it to be outside. And in Tonglen practice, we do the opposite. We breathe it in. We look at suffering, we see suffering, we feel the suffering in ourselves and in others. And rather than turning away, we breathe it in. We breathe it in the images of this thick, dark smoke that we're breathing in. And what's happening? What happens when we breathe it in? It breaks us open. It breaks open our hearts. And what's there when we break open in that way? Those places where we've been closed and isolated and tried to keep our little territory, right? It breaks down the picket fence. And what's there is actually the openness of connectedness, the openness of we are all together in an inescapable web of mutuality. Martin Luther King Jr. The web of mutuality that we are always in, all the time. So when we breathe in, if it's hard to breathe in, it should be hard. This is not normally what we do, or, impulsively what we do. So we breathe in that suffering. We let it break us open. And it breaks us open into this vastness, this openness, this expansiveness, this vast potentiality. And then we breathe out that goodness that Peter spoke about, gratitude. Whatever goodness you experience, whatever health you have, whatever joy you have, whatever love you have, you offer it. You offer it out. You give it away. You give it to all beings, that they may be well, that they may be healthy, that they may be happy, that they may be able to take a breath of fresh air with ease. There's Kalu Rinpoche, a great, beautiful teacher. He writes about Tonglen, and there's always this question: should I really breathe this in? Should I really breathe in the suffering of another being, of what I see? And then he says, imagine, what if you could, with one breath, inhale, relieve all beings of their suffering? Would you hesitate? And I don't want to hold this as sort of this like moral imperative over our head, like, would I not? Oh my goodness, I'm not such a good person. But more is like, almost like a koan. Like, what if I could? What if I could? Could I step in that way, right? That's the bodhisattva. That courage, the heart, right? Courage, cœur, the heart. Could I step into that? So it's to me, it's actually this invitation he offers. What if we could? So let's do some Tonglen practice together. And if this is your first time, don't worry about it. Welcome. And we hope this practice can serve you and others in the years and ahead.
Yes. So, yeah, as Charlotte said, we're not breathing that into our small self and taking on this suffering and further, loading up the ego. We're breathing it in within this realization of vast luminous awareness that is the substrate of our consciousness, of our manifestation. And there's tremendous, infinite space for absorption in that non-dual essence. So we breathe that through us into that realization, and then breathe out clear, white light that has this quality of removing suffering or offering whatever is most needed by all beings, by any specific being, and by all beings. And so I want to invite you to join us, and let's do the Tonglen practice together. So welcome to close eyes, if that's easier. And again, come present in the moment. Bring your attention, let go of external distractions or thoughts as much as it is possible for you in the moment, and just bring your attention into the moment. You can use again your body, the sensations in your body, being present in your body, or your breath if you wish. Just simply present in your immediate place. And then imagine, if you wish, you can again connect with everyone on this call and start there. Because we all have our particular challenges and sufferings. You can also include your own suffering, your own, whatever is challenging for you in this moment, be it disease or anxiety or any other concern. And bring that to mind, and then breathe in the suffering associated with that, the heaviness. Imagine it like a smoke, like Charlotte said. And on the top of the in-breath, if you wish, you can flash briefly on that vast, luminous essence of our awareness, of our consciousness. And then breathe out the absence of suffering, relief, love, compassion, loving kindness, relief from suffering, to yourself, to others on this call, to those close to you that are in particular need of compassion and relief and ease and peace in this time, and healing. Just find your own rhythm on the in-breath and on the out-breath, breathing in the suffering, releasing it into the vast space of the ground of being, and breathing out clear, light, healing, loving kindness, benefiting beings. And then you can expand in your own pace out, maybe from the beings or from your immediate environment or town or neighborhood, out to whoever you'd like to benefit from your meditation, whoever you think may benefit from this. Eventually, it could be all of humanity in this very interesting and profound time. Again, you can bring to mind doctors and health workers, nurses, and others that are on the front line, so to speak. People that actually have contracted this disease and are in a serious condition. Breathe away their suffering, or relieve their suffering through pulling with your breath. Flash on vast emptiness. Breathe out healing, support, whatever they may need most in the moment. Relieve their loneliness, their suffering. May they find ease in this moment and beyond. You can think of hot spots on the planet where the impact has been particularly bad right now. Breathe in the suffering, breathe out relief. So the last few breaths, breathe in all the pain and suffering that remains. And when you breathe out, see the world and beings being reestablished without suffering, with relief, with ease, with peace. Do a few breaths like that to end your meditation. And then again, bring your attention back to your body, your immediate environment. And if you wish, you can open your eyes.
So we wanted to open it up. We have a little more time for any questions that might have come up about anything we've done today, or our practices, or anything we've said. So feel free to write those into the chat. And I think there's always a little bit of a time delay. So I'm going to just share one other piece around resistance. Some of you mentioned resistance in your reflecting back on the emotions practice we did. And sometimes in Tonglen, there's resistance as well. And so resistance is fine too. Can we accept resistance? So when we're talking about accepting emotions and going into them, like going into that lake, we can let resistance be part of that. Can even our resistance be all right? It's that compassion for exactly what's arising on us, even and particularly those aspects we feel we don't want to see in ourselves. And in Tonglen, resistance, I don't want to take in someone else's suffering. Then breathe that in, breathe in the resistance, and breathe out that relief from resistance to yourself. So resistance is part of this part of these practices.
Someone is saying, could you explain more about breathing in the suffering into the ground of being versus into myself? So they're both really relevant. From a more a higher overview, the reason we can breathe in the suffering is because, at least from a Buddhist point of view, the ego is seen as a construct in some way that doesn't have absolute existence, absolute independent existence. The ego is something that comes into being as a result of many factors and forms a matrix for experience that is interpreted as being a self. It becomes very personal. It feels like it is I that am experiencing what is out there. And so Buddhism talks about this ego as actually existing within an ocean of consciousness that we are forever completely connected to, and that in fact we are made of, in a way, we are a manifestation of the radiance of this ground of being. And so from that point of view, we don't believe so much small, even though there's a tendency for the ego to want to protect itself, in realizing that the ego is not something, but it's not something solid. We know we can breathe in the suffering and relieve that suffering without getting stuck in an idea of the small self now having to take on more suffering. It's not sort of a zero-sum game of us and the world, and now we're taking suffering from someone else, and now we have it, because we have this view of the ego that is much more transparent, translucent. However, at a more direct, from a more direct point of view, there's also an emphasis on compassion in being willing to take things on for others on a more direct or relative sense. Like Charlotte was saying about Kalu Rinpoche, who said, if you could take the suffering in one breath away from all beings, would you do that? So it's that willingness, that courage, that compassion to want to really relieve suffering to the extent where you would take it on. So there is an aspect of that as well. And you find your own place in that.
And I might just add, there's a question around here of, why do we breathe in the suffering? Is it to build more compassion? And what if you're an empath? And so, yes, I think for some of us, that sense of feeling the suffering of others we're doing that kind of already all the time. And here there's maybe a helpful distinction between empathy and compassion. And it's come a lot out of research, actually, neuroscience, but it points to the slight difference. So empathy is what allows us to feel the suffering of another. And if we just go with empathy, we get pulled into that deep hole, you might say, of another being suffering. And it might feel like it's compassion because I got down in the hole with you. But actually, it's not necessarily an empowered place from which we can relieve the suffering. We're down in the hole with someone, but we still have no way out. And so the turn to compassion here, and this is what Tonglen is based on, and I think what Peter was just talking about, is we're tapping in to a vaster ground of what we and who we are. And that we are not closed, small beings, but we are vast beings. The self is a helpful construct, but who we really are, that ground of being, is open and vast and infinite. And it is our true nature. And when we allow ourselves to tap into it, we actually can hold so much. That doesn't mean, however, at a relative level, that we don't pay attention. What is too much? When are we not in a state to be able to have one more phone call with someone who's having a hard time, when we actually do need to maybe pull back? So in Tonglen practice, work with where you are. Pema Chodron has this beautiful book, right? Start where you are, wherever that is. And one day you might feel like you can take the pain of the universe. And the next day, it's really just you and your brokenheartedness and maybe one friend. And that's where you can genuinely remain present. And so work with where you are. That's genuine compassion. Thank you for the beautiful questions. And I think there are many more which we haven't gotten a chance to get to, but we wanted to close with a few announcements. First, there was a question here, where can you listen to more meditations like this? So Peter and I lead every evening, 6 to 6:30 Mountain Time. That's 5 p.m. Pacific or 8 p.m. Eastern Time. Compassion meditations, Monday through Friday. So we'll start up again tomorrow. And I think Lori will be able to put in the URL. It's via Zoom. So you can just log in via Zoom. And next Sunday at the same time on Facebook Live through Tara Mandala, Dorje Lopön Chandra Easton will be leading a sadhana for the 20th Tara. The Tara Connected with Healing Epidemics, a very beautiful practice. So again, next Sunday at the same time.
10 a.m. Pacific.
And then I wanted to let you know I'll be leading a virtual Green Tara retreat. So Green Tara, the deity of compassionate action, compassion in action, a Green Tara practice. That'll be April 23rd through 27th. It's a virtual retreat, and it's designed as a pay-it-forward retreat. So please don't let finances keep you away. And you can see that on the Tara Mandala webpage, taramandala.org. And then finally, we have a Feeding Your Demons certification program, which we are launching May 9th. And that will be an entirely online program, except for a closing retreat at the end of the year. And again, that description is on taramandala.org. And that work is very connected to this as well. It's really a practice of compassion.
It's really a skillful means to work with obstacles in a very simple but profound process. And so there's a whole year-long certification program, or you can just take Feeding Your Demons 1 and level 2 as, individual courses. So visit the website to see that. And I just want to say thank you so much. Oh, did you have another?
One more, sorry.
Oh, yeah.
One more. If there's anyone who's ill right now or perhaps has passed and you would like them to be held in Tara Mandala's daily prayer circle, practice circle, you can email their name to info@taramandala.org and they'll be held in those daily
They'll practice
practices
for 49 days. After, if it's someone who passed away, they'll practice for the traditional 49 days after the passing of that person. But also just disease and so forth. Please feel free to reach out. Thank you so much for joining us. Thanks for your attention. It's wonderful for us to be with you, to have been with you today, and send you so many blessings for your particular situation and place and who you are impacting in your life and helping. So thank you very much.
We'll close with a dedication of merit. So take a moment and gather together any and all benefit, goodness that's been generated in this time together. And we send out to benefit all beings everywhere. Thank you.